morning. Good morning. Please be seated. It's a joy to see all of you today. On the surface of today's gospel, it's all about being humble, finding humbleness, exhibiting, living humbleness. There's three simple messages that we can just glean from the surface of today's gospel. And that's that first, no matter how much we know, there's always more to learn. Two, we're known. We're known by our charity and by our generosity. And third, maybe a little more subtle, but still there, Jesus is pushing for a different mindset, a change in human impulse. But we hear this as a parable. We hear this story about a parable, about where to sit and who to invite. Parables are meant to be a little more opaque and a little harder to understand. So we're going to do a little work on this one to see what messages might be hidden. But before we do that, if you notice on where the gospel is written in your leaflet, you'll see we have verse 1, then we skip 6 verses, and we go to verse 7. And there's a hidden story in there. And I think we need to know that hidden story in order to understand this parable a little bit better. What happens is Jesus is with the Pharisees at dinner, and a man with dropsy, we hear, appears. Dropsy is a really abnormal amount or accumulation of fluid in the body, and it's a signal of something very seriously wrong. So this individual was very sick. Jesus looks at the Pharisees and says, "Is it okay to heal this individual on the Sabbath?" And the Pharisees say nothing. Jesus heals this individual, and Jesus looks at them, the Pharisees, again and says, "If this was your son and daughter, what would you have done on this Sabbath day?" And again, they're silent. If we remember from the first verse, they are looking at him carefully. They're really scrutinizing what he's doing. They're judging him. And then our gospel begins. He says, "Okay, I'm going to tell you this parable." Certainly, the first part of the gospel was partially directed at those Pharisees and their arrogance and lack of humbleness. But again, this is a parable. It's something more nuanced, more broad. Again, humbleness is a part of this, but not all of this. In the second part of the gospel, we hear Jesus say who should be invited. And it's the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. And when those are invited, blessings abound because they can't repay. Luke has, the gospel writer recall, Luke has Jesus do something very interesting here. And it's called divine reversal in the Gospel of Luke. Those people Jesus lists to invite, the poor, the crippled, the lame, blind, in Leviticus, are not allowed to be priests. They are specifically excluded from becoming Pharisees, from becoming priests. And Jesus is saying, these are the ones you should be inviting. These are the ones you should be serving. Because they're the ones you're called to serve, not the wealthy folks sitting around this table with all of you. So when you're a guest, the simple message is be humble. When you're a host, have a generous invitation. But what I believe the more subtle purpose of this parable is that this is a foundational scripture for our Eucharistic common table theology, for the generosity of welcome, which we sang on our entrance today. Good choice, Ben. Didn't know we were going to sing that when I was preparing the sermon. But our leaflet is filled with this generosity of welcome. On page 2 of our leaflet, there's numerous statements about welcome. All children are welcome at all services. All people are invited to our table on page 16 of the leaflet. Excuse me, after the blessing. There's a stress on participation of all in our Eucharistic theology. This is a truly important element of our ritual. Buried in the prayer book on page 407, way in the back of the prayer book, are 2 or 3 pages of rubrics in like 8-point font, telling you do's and don'ts and do's and don'ts, and please do this. An important one on the bottom of page 407 says, everyone comes forward. Everyone stands and comes forward who are able to gather around the table and receive the same bread. And I think St. John says something remarkable in that since pandemic, we take the bread back and everybody eats it at the same time. It is a physical manifestation of this common meal that we all share. We all share whether we're mad at each other, whether we agree with each other. We are to be made strong and given the wherewithal to face what we need to face in life by sharing this meal, by sharing this piece of bread, by ingesting Jesus into us to strengthen us. After our fraction anthem, after the communion prayer, after our fraction anthem, we hear the standard line of the gifts of God for the people of God. Meaning, these are gifts for us and they are for all of us. There's a phrase, all are welcome, that's tagged on in our leaflet. I think that's really important around our common table. But there's another invitation that's out there. There's another invitation to the table that it's from the Iona community, from the Isle of Iona, and it's called the Iona Invitation. And I think it's beautiful. And I'd like you to hear it. This is the table, not of the church, but of Jesus Christ. It is made ready for those who love God and who want to love God. So come, you who have much faith, and you who have little, and you who have been here often, and you who have not been here for a long time or ever before. You who have tried to follow Jesus, and you who are trying again, or trying for the first time. Come, not because the church invites you. It is Jesus who invites you to be known and fed here. It's a beautiful, broad invitation that asks for that physical get up and come and receive and be fed and be changed. The generosity of that gift of this common table and that physical manifestation that we practice here is beautiful. All are welcome.